Alrighty, guys, welcome in here to Slaughterhouse Sports here. Spencer G here, and we're gonna get cracking here tonight. We're gonna get cracking here, talking about. I'm gonna talk first about really the holistic point of view of college football. Going to talk about what I think like kind of the lessons of college football are, and kind of look at the country and look at the teams, and just give my perspective on where we are at. It is November 26th of 2024. So when I look at these programs, I really think that there is a talent gap between the SEC and every other league. I think that Oklahoma and Texas and the recruiting in the SEC is at such a high level. So let's break down, what programs are probably in the top 10 or top 12 of the SEC. So the SEC now has 16 teams in it. So when we look at the totality of the SEC, and this is kind of going to be a segment where we're going to talk for about probably 15 to 20 minutes, just about think about what I want you guys to think about is, where would you want to coach? What programs do you think are going to be successful where we are at in our current state when you look around the country? Like, who's a sleeping giant? What programs are on the rise? Kind of our stock report as the season kind of goes to a close. So in the SEC, we have the Texas Longhorns. So I'll list them here. Let's count together. So Texas, Georgia, those are like the elite SEC programs. I'm going to put Alabama from a resource standpoint, from a team standpoint. I think that Alabama can field a really good team. Those are three teams every year that should be competing in the SEC. Number 4, the LSU Tigers. I think that LSU has a very good recruiting base. I think LSU could be really, really good. I'm going to put A&M at 5. Then I'm going to go the Oklahoma Sooners at 6. And at 7, I'm going to go with Florida. All right, so those programs can always recruit, can always field really, really good teams year after year. Number 8, then, we have Auburn. South Carolina is number 9, and South Carolina has great coaching. Like, Dowell Loggins is a brilliant coach. They're great at finding talent. They have a talent-based recruiting area, and honestly, Shane Beamer has turned out to be one of the best coaches in the SEC. So I rate South Carolina as like the 9th overall job. Then I'm going to go Ole Miss at 10, and then I'm going to go Missouri at probably 11. All right, Missouri at probably 11. Number 12 might even be Kentucky. Kentucky at 12, Arkansas at 13, and then we're rounding into our last couple teams, which are Mississippi State, Arkansas, and then Vanderbilt. So mentioned A&M, mentioned Oklahoma, mentioned Auburn, Florida, LSU, the Mississippi State. So the worst programs in the SEC, the toughest to win, are Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and Arkansas are the toughest places to win. I don't think Missouri has a ton of money compared to the other institutions, and Kentucky is a tough place to win because a lot of that money is going to go to basketball. The point is that these 10 or 12 programs are flat out great. And you look at the Big Ten, and the Big Ten has only probably 2 programs that could compete for this SEC title. We have Ohio State, and Ohio State would be there with Georgia, Texas, Alabama, LSU. Ohio State, even this year with Will Howard, I think that they might even be looking like Georgia or Texas. I think Oregon with Dylan Gabriel at quarterback. Now, Oregon's defense is really, really good, and it would be fun to see them, get tested by an SEC. So, all of these things, factor in. 1 second, guys. 1 second. We'll be back in literally a second. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so we were talking about, Oregon and Ohio State are right there. Notre Dame would be middle of the pack. You can make fun of Brian Kelly all you want, but Notre Dame would be middle of the pack in the SEC. Or they would be, they would be in the upper echelon of the SEC. Kind of middle of the pack. So we have Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon, and then probably the top 6 or 7 SEC. So if we're going to go top 15 teams in the country, they would mostly all be SEC. And then I would put in Ohio State, Oregon, and Notre Dame. I would have Penn State ranked like 15 to 17 probably in terms of the best jobs in the country. I'm not sure if Miami, the problem with Miami is that they're not really fielding a football program from an NIL standpoint. Well, their coaching staff, I don't think, is there. They have no real consistency. I don't think their staff is as dialed in. And if Florida were to even play Miami again, ironically, I think that Miami and Florida, if they matched up on a neutral field just even this year, I would think that the Florida Gators would honestly be like I think that they'd be a 2-point underdog again, and I think the game would go very different the way that those two programs are going because Miami's defense is cratered. So just in terms of who the best of the best programs are, like who could field a really good team, like if there were no conferences, all right, if there were 0 conferences, who has the best football programs around the country? Like you're fielding teams. So Florida might have this year, like they might even be the 12th best football team currently playing right now. Same with South Carolina. I know they start off the season the way they did and they lost games. So I'm fine with, Arizona State making it. I'm fine with Penn State because they lost one game, so they're more deserving on the season. But where the talent lies and kind of like the power rating system of the way I look at these teams, who's professionals, the way who's hitting harder, who has like the best athletes, the best coaching, it is just flat out going to be the SEC. But what is so kind of interesting about the model and where we're at in college football now is that the regular seasons for the SEC are going to be where you make your money. Those are going to be the big games on campus, and you got to enjoy the SEC games for what they are. Like that Georgia-Texas game, like the odds of them playing again in the playoff are not going to be that high. You're going to have a lot of really, really good games just in the SEC. But when it comes to a postseason, it's actually, ironically, the SEC is probably not even going to be there at the end of the year. The majority of their teams are going to get wiped out by the struggle of the regular season. It's just going to wipe everybody out, almost like the Big 12 in college basketball. So now the way that you're at, the way that we analyze this thing now is that Oregon and Ohio State, if I were a coach out there, I would look at the ACC, and you got Syracuse and Duke, and these two teams are winning 7 and 8 games. If they played in the SEC, they wouldn't win 1 game. Or they'd maybe win 2 games, Duke and Syracuse, respectively. If Pittsburgh played in the SEC, they would be lucky to be Mississippi State or the University of Kentucky. They would be getting killed if Pittsburgh played in the SEC, but they're in the ACC, they can win about 8 games, right? We can look at in the Big 12 conference, like Cincy or West Virginia. I think the Big 12 is better than the ACC. Like, I think like a team like Duke, who has a nice quarterback in Malik Murphy, first year, the fact that they're going to go like 9-3 is awesome. But it also shows you that the ACC as a conference, you can come in and do damage quite early, which as a coach is fun. So if you're Dabo Swinney, if you're a coach, Arkansas will pay you a lot of money, and you can ironically field a great team and get a lot of transfers. And a great team at Arkansas might go 7 or 8 wins, all right? And your fan base, it's just not even going to be that much fun. Like, you can bust your ass to try to win 6 games, 7 games at Arkansas. Or as a coach, you can go to a Virginia Tech. You could try to look at Syracuse. You can look at Wake Forest, and you can use the portal. Like if Vanderbilt played in the ACC, Vanderbilt will be having a lot more fun right now. Like a Vanderbilt, look at SMU. Look at how much fun SMU is to coach if you're Rhett Lashley. You're 11-1, and you could compete for a title. The Big 12 conferences are really fun conference to coach in because, again, none of the teams are that overly dominant. The transfer portal is okay. The recruiting. So it's a very, very fair to the point where, if you field a great team, like Arizona State can be picked last and win the league. But in the SEC, I really, in this model, have trouble seeing Kentucky, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, South Carolina even. This season's amazing. But even you look at Ole Miss, and they fielded the best possible team, and they still can't complete the job of going to Atlanta and dominating the conference. So the journey at some of these schools, you're DOA, unfortunately. You're dead on arrival when you arrive at some of these schools. And you're going to get paid a lot of money. You're going to coach NFL talent. But are you really going to enjoy your job? Is it really going to be a fun experience? You're coaching at the best level, which is nice. It's almost like the NFL, but your chances of actually getting to the end, your chances of beating Kirby, of beating Texas, Alabama, Auburn, the teams are just going to continue to cannibalize themselves. And you continue to extend and try your best. Hugh Freeze at Auburn is going to have a great year, and the team's going to be very good, and they're going to win 8 or 9 games. And the fans are going to be why can't, Gus Malzahn even won 11 games or 10 games? And it's because the way that the season, the way that the sport is mapped out now with Oklahoma and Texas in the SEC, the Texas and Oklahoma factors have really just blown this league apart. I mean, because even if Georgia beats Texas, Texas still wears the ever-living you-know-what out of that team. Oklahoma, even though Ole Miss beats Oklahoma, the body blows of jabs that you have to play to even play an Arkansas or to even play an Oklahoma this year, when Oklahoma's iteration, they don't even have an offense, but they're so physical that for 18 to 22-year-olds, it's going to body bag you in terms of body blows and jabs to the point where Notre Dame is not getting stung to the limit that an Ole Miss is getting stung at. Ole Miss has to go to Florida, so when you look at Notre Dame, and now let's look at Notre Dame's schedule, they have it made where the postseason, they're going to be heading in and they're going to be fresh, and they could technically win the national championship. So when we look at Wikipedia and look back on the season, Notre Dame could really theoretically be the last team standing because, again, their competition is a lot easier. And they've remained fresh, and their two deep is going to be fresh. And they're beating teams by 30 and 40, and they're putting their guys in late. They're taking their starters out. So in the battle of attrition, this is what I'm so curious about now with the playoff, is even though there's going to be a little bit of rest, is 1 week going to make the difference for the SEC teams, or are they just going to burn out? Because I think that they can really just burn out. Oregon and Ohio State are two of the best jobs in the country, because the bottom of the Big Ten, let's look at the bottom of the Big Ten compared to the SEC. All right. And some of this might seem like common sense, but I think it's an interesting exercise to think about the landscape of college football and how much you're really seeing this year. There's a lot of parity now in the SEC. I'm not saying if it's a good or a bad thing. Maybe that'll be another show. But you're seeing the transfer portal and NIL really have an effect on the SEC. And if Saban was at Alabama, it's something we'll never see. But if a coach ever built a dynasty with Oklahoma and Texas in the league and in the NIL footprint in the SEC, it would be unbelievably impressive. So I think that Ohio State and Oregon, like the Big Ten Conference, is much more like the old SEC was, where the older SEC that I grew up on, I'm 30 now, so from 2000 to like 2000, for the last 22 years, we could say, for the majority of my life, the SEC was very similar to the Big Ten conferences now. You would have 3 to 4 really good teams, then some really decent teams from 4 to 8, and then teams that were outright bad from 8 to 12. And it looked very much like the ACC. It looks very much like the conferences do today. But because of NIL and the portal, the bad teams get lifted. And going back to what I said about the college football playoff, or just anywhere, like Oklahoma's defense is going to be able to connect at some point and give you a game because of just how much talent is there that can be summoned. But it was never this way in the past. When you miss on recruits, the team would look like Florida State, and there was no way to fix it. And it would take you as a coach years and years to build it. And the coaches who liked that it was harder to build it too are the coaches like Nick Saban, like Les Miles, Gus, even at Auburn. Like, let's look at, coach, even like a Kevin Sumlin, right? He struck gold with Manziel that year. And when you didn't have a portal, your high school recruiting was essentially everything. The way you did your program was really everything. And there were no the quick fix wasn't really there. So it was it was an uphill climb, and you needed to, like, everything about culture mattered. Everything about your staff really mattered. And there was a pattern to what you were watching. There was a pattern to, okay, this team is not good now. This team is good. And the upsets, the upsets would hit different, and so on and so forth. So college football was just easier to kind of understand maybe to the fans. So this year is fun in a lot of ways. I like the ridiculousness and chaos of it, but some people also might not like that it's harder to wrap your head around, like Alabama or teams in the SEC, like not just going out there and not doing your job, because game to game, the sport is just becoming more unpredictable. Now, we'll have to see if this ages out like this is this year. And I do wonder in the future, like the SEC is probably going to eventually break away from this modeling system, and the playoff is going to shrink. So in a perfect world, if we had a perfect world, I do think the Big Ten championship can be fun, but I think that the SEC championship in Atlanta, like, it's great that it's in the Georgia Dome. In a perfect world, we might even go back and put like Texas, Oklahoma. You might even add a Kansas State. Like, you might even, looking at it, you might even put A&M back in the Big 12. Like, you would have to, if you had a perfect world, you would redo the conferences to the point where they're a little bit smaller, and like a little bit smaller. The portal's a little bit more under control. The playoffs are probably 6 to 8 teams, not 12 teams, and the conference championship, like, almost, it might not even take place, just because I would want at the most to be 15 games. I think that 17 games is too many. That's my opinion. I think the product gets a little worse. It's harder to focus on everything that you see. I don't like the length of the season. I want there to be, like, I want the regular season to still be impeccably good. So I'll admit, like, the games the other day were really good, like Florida beating Ole Miss, the night where Arkansas beat Tennessee was fun, right? So some of it still has been fun regular season, but the college football playoff right now, I think it would be better if if you didn't have an SEC championship, right? You'd get Texas and Texas A&M. The winner of that would probably be in. So then if you had like an 8-team playoff this year, let's map out like the 8, which I think would be appropriate. You would get Texas. If Texas beats Texas A&M, you would get them. Georgia. So you wouldn't play an SEC championship game. The other team would be the Tennessee Volunteers would get in as the third SEC. Then you would go out there and you would put the ACC might, so the SEC would rest. The ACC, you might have to have a conference championship game. So I would probably put Miami, the winner of Miami and SMU is going to get into the playoff. Okay, so the ACC might get 1. Then I would put Notre Dame in there. So we're at 5. And then in the Big Ten Conference, I would put Oregon, Ohio State. They are going to be playing a Big Ten championship. It's selfishly going to be a really fun game, and I'm going to probably go to that game, and I'm excited about that. And then you would choose between Penn State and Indiana, which would be very interesting too. What happens if the Big Ten had a qualifying round? How great would it be if like Oregon and Ohio State are locked in and like Penn State had to play Indiana for that final spot in the playoff, just like Miami and SMU. So the perfect system would be, if we looked at like how like fair it would be. What are the teams like that I'm missing? Like Boise State, I just look at them. They win by 4 against Wyoming. They're not that great of a team. I mean, I know that they played Oregon, and they have a really good running back. Again, though, they're not housing their opponents like Indiana, like the other teams are doing. So the way that I would roll with this, okay, in a perfect world, let's seed out, like if this were an 8-team playoff, let's seed it out. We would actually have Ohio State and Oregon not play. We wouldn't have a Big Ten championship either in this scenario. The number 1 overall seed would be Oregon if they beat Washington. The number 2 seed would be between Ohio State and Texas. And I'll actually put Texas. What is Texas's best win? So then you'd look at the resumes. Ohio State did beat Indiana and Penn State. I'll put Ohio State 2. Put Texas at 3. Then yes. So we're still continuing. Texas at 3. I'll put the Georgia. Are you going to put Georgia at Tennessee? I'll put Georgia at 4. So we got Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee is 5. I'll put you could put Tennessee and Notre Dame, like Notre Dame's 5 or 6. I would probably put Georgia above Notre Dame, but Notre Dame squarely in 5 or 6, right? And then for 7 and 8, you're going to have 2 games. You're going to have, somehow this is going to be mapped out where you're going to have Penn State and Indiana are going to play for the 7 seed in this playoff. And then you're going to have, then have Miami and SMU playing for the playoff, right? These 2 teams kind of had to play that extra week. Then let's see, if you give 2 teams a bye in this scenario, you would then have, this would be great. This I think would work. 3 against 8, 4 against 7, 5 and 6. All right, I'd love to give Ohio State and Oregon, I would love to give them buys in this scenario. Would love it. All right. So then, those 2 teams would get by and continue to get rested, and then you can have your on-campus games, and that's the way it would work. Having 12 is really, really, oh my gosh, I forgot. I'm sorry, I forgot completely about the Big 12. Forgot about the Big 12 completely. Damn. Forgot about the Big 12, so. Yeah, forgot about the Big 12. So as tough as it would be, like I like the Big 12. I like the Big 12 champion. I like that team getting one team in. So I like that. They would get a team in. So then, unfortunately, Georgia and Tennessee, Tennessee still might be out of this, kind of 18 playoff field. All right. So, but that's kind of like illustrating the kind of entire landscape of the season. If you're a coach, you want to go to the ACC or you want to be Oregon or Ohio State because of your competition level. And folks, that is where we stand on the totality of college football. So it's a long form video. We're going to mix these in from time to time. Helps us kind of talk through these processes. The majority of my videos probably on this channel are going to be 8 to 10 minutes, like bite-sized chunks on the go, right? But then sometimes we're going to talk some long form. We're going to talk some things out on the show and kind of have a longer form late night kind of like fireside chat, so to speak. And this is about the college football playoff and where we're at.